I parked a block away, the engine ticking in the cooling evening air, and studied the house through the darkened windows. The spring air carried faint laughter and music spilling out onto the driveway, mingling with the scent of freshly cut grass. Balloons, pink and blue, floated near the front steps, and a banner stretched across the porch announced a celebration I hadn't been told about. Curiosity pricked me, but so did a sense of foreboding. I had just returned from a successful deal overseas, $15 million in hand, anticipating surprise and joy for those I loved. Instead, I found signs of a domestic scene meticulously prepared, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I lingered in the car a moment longer, letting my gaze sweep over neatly stacked gifts and the faces of guests through the windows. Each detail sharpened my suspicion, a mother-in-law subtly stiffening when she caught my eye, the faint tension in a group clustered near the living room doorway. I thought about the years I had poured into my career, the nights spent negotiating contracts and traveling for clients, and the contrast to this suburban display of domesticity. A sense of control ran through me. I observed, catalogued, and predicted. My mind mapped possible scenarios, weighing the advantage of immediate action against strategic patience. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and walked toward the front porch, my pulse steady despite the rising unease. Crossing the threshold into the living room, I froze. There, unmistakable, was my husband, laughing softly, his hand resting on the belly of my best friend. The room's warmth felt suddenly alien, suffocating. I watched as they exchanged words meant only for each other, oblivious to the intrusion of my presence. My mother and mother-in-law glanced at each other, their expressions tight and uncertain. The air thickened, almost viscous with tension. Shock and disbelief surged, but I held my composure, studying their body language, noting the subtle tells of guilt and avoidance. The truth had a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully hidden. I let my gaze drift over the room, taking in small, telling details, the baby shower decorations that mirrored gifts I had carefully selected for another occasion, the carefully arranged table settings, the whispered conversations of guests sensing an unspoken tension. Anger simmered beneath my controlled exterior. I reminded myself of the long history of trust and sacrifice, the nights I had stayed late at work while family milestones passed me by. And yet, I remained observant, strategic. My first words were deliberate, measured. I didn't erupt, I waited, letting them see the calm that masked my inner storm. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked, my voice steady, eyes locked on both of them. My husband's attempt to respond was cut off as I asserted my presence, dissecting his excuses mentally while he fumbled for coherence. The murmurs of guests grew, some glancing uncomfortably, others whispering with curiosity, as I maintained silent authority in the room. Moving slowly through the room, I noted the subtle shifts in conversation and posture, the way some guests leaned in toward my mother, expecting guidance, the discreet avoidance of eye contact from those who knew. I assessed my own leverage, moral, emotional, financial. Every detail mattered, her hand hovering near a gift she had prepared, the banner emblazoned with words meant to celebrate, not deceive. My past resilience and career acumen anchored me, my thoughts traced past victories, reminding me that patience was often more potent than immediate confrontation. Anger, strategic and simmering, coiled within me, ready to be released at the precise moment that would have the most impact. Finally, I spoke, initiating a confrontation that was as much about assertion as about clarity. Questions came, sharp but controlled, demanding acknowledgement and explanation. My husband hesitated, fumbling, my best friend's face fell, and the room seemed to constrict around the weight of truth. I remained calm, calculating my words, pacing them against the ebb and flow of audience, the guests and family who bore witness. Their discomfort amplified the effect of my presence. I reflected silently, the sacrifices, the nights missed, the trust betrayed, all converging into this moment. I did not shout, did not plead, I let the truth resonate, letting it land like a stone thrown into still water. Exiting the living room, I left a space charged with tension, every eye following my measured steps. I moved into the hallway, taking in the echoes of laughter now tinged with unease. A specific gift caught my eye, a pastel blanket, folded with care, sitting untouched on the chair. It became a subtle reminder, a seed for what would come, a small anchor to the storm brewing in my mind. My heart remained steady, my plan forming in silence. Tonight was not the night for a full confrontation, it was a night for observation, assessment, and preparation. Every gesture, every glance, every whispered word was noted, catalogued, stored for use when the time came. The party continued around me, oblivious to my inward deliberations. I allowed the scene to unfold while I shaped my strategy, understanding fully the social and emotional leverage I held. I could see the cracks forming in their composure, the uncertainty behind forced smiles. The past, present, and potential futures ran through my mind in parallel, evidence, legal considerations, social maneuvering, all components of a measured response. Inwardly, I resolved, it's time they see the truth, but on my terms. And with that quiet determination, I stepped outside to gather my thoughts, the early evening fading into a deeper dusk, every breath a reminder that control was still mine, and the reckoning had only just begun. I lingered near the doorway, taking a steadying breath as I absorbed the scene before me. The party continued, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. My husband laughed quietly with my best friend, their hands brushing as if nothing had changed, as if I wasn't standing there, eyes locked on them. I noticed the subtle stiffening of my mother, the furtive glances of my aunt, the half-whispered words that carried more meaning than the cheerful chatter. Each micro-behavior reinforced what I had suspected, confirming the depth of betrayal. The realization hit me not with explosive anger, but with a cold, precise clarity. Every detail of their deception now settled in my mind, and I measured it, analyzed it, and began plotting the steps I would take. The room felt smaller, the laughter more grating, as I processed the weight of the betrayal and the silent complicity surrounding me. I moved subtly to a corner, letting my eyes follow the interactions without revealing my presence. Each smile, each touch, each unguarded gesture was catalogued and stored, and I found a strange sense of empowerment in observing silently. I considered the years I had devoted to building trust, balancing a demanding career with family life, only to discover the duplicity hiding behind familiar faces. The gifts and decorations, the carefully curated party, it all became part of a larger puzzle, a context I could use to regain control. I reminded myself of the old saying, patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. Every observation fed into a calculated plan, a mental rehearsal of questions, statements, and measured confrontations I would deploy when the timing was right. Despite the shock, my mind was methodical, turning betrayal into strategy, turning outrage into a quiet, simmering power. I tested the waters with subtle gestures, a raised eyebrow here, a pointed glance there, gauging reactions without giving away my full awareness. My husband flinched ever so slightly, and the discomfort in my best friend's eyes confirmed the truth I already knew. I did not rush forward, did not demand explanations, instead, I became a quiet presence, a force felt without being spoken. The dynamics in the room began to shift, guests subtly reacting to the tension they could sense but not name. My mother tried to intercede, a soft hand on my arm, but I pulled away gently, signaling that I was not to be swayed by concern or guilt. Each movement, each choice, strengthened the image of authority I projected even as the anger and betrayal festered beneath the surface. The evening's atmosphere became a silent battleground. Small conflicts arose in hushed tones, a comment from my mother-in-law met with my controlled reply, a whispered exchange with a neighbor noted and filed away. I allowed myself to be part of the scene without surrendering to it, letting each interaction reinforce my awareness and my position. The passive complicity of family members only sharpened my resolve. They may have sought to isolate me, to let the deceit pass unchallenged, but I was already formulating the steps that would assert both truth and justice. Each glance at the carefully placed gifts and the thoughtful decorations became a reminder, these symbols of celebration had been co-opted for deception, and they would now serve my strategy. As the evening wore on, I stepped onto the patio, letting the cool air wash over me. The fading light mirrored my own reflection on the unfolding drama, calm on the surface, sharp and precise beneath. My eyes caught a pastel blanket from the previous night, the one I had set aside, now lying near a chair as if forgotten. It became a subtle anchor, a reminder of what had been and a foreshadowing of the leverage I intended to wield. The silence around me was purposeful, a pause before the calculated strike. I let the sounds of the party reach my ears, catalogued, measured, and considered. Tonight would not be the night for explosive confrontation, it would be the night for observation, patience, and preparation. Every move I made, every word I held back, was a part of a larger design, a plan built on the understanding that the full impact of truth would carry itself when delivered at the right moment. I took a slow breath, centering myself amidst the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. My anger was present, yes, but tempered with strategy. The betrayal was no longer just personal, it was social, emotional, and tactical, and I intended to navigate it all with precision. As I gazed back toward the living room, I felt the weight of anticipation pressing against my chest. The room's energy shifted with my quiet assessment. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only reveal the truth but re-establish my authority, my intelligence, and my control. I knew the next steps required patience, timing, and clarity of purpose. Tonight, the game had begun, and I was already several moves ahead. I took a deep breath, knowing the next words I spoke would change everything tonight. The tension in the room was palpable, each whispered laugh and casual touch a dagger I catalogued silently. I had watched long enough, the moment to speak had arrived. My hands were steady, my mind sharp, and I knew every word I would choose needed precision. I let my gaze sweep across the room, noting the subtle signs of discomfort among family members, the brief flinch of my husband, the carefully measured smile of my best friend. Each gesture was a thread I could pull to unravel the carefully constructed facade. I moved deliberately toward the dining area, the echo of my heels on the hardwood floor barely audible over the subdued chatter, a subtle reminder that I had arrived and that nothing would remain hidden tonight. "Can we talk?" I began, my voice calm but edged with authority. The laughter ceased, the room stilling as eyes turned to me. My husband froze mid-sentence, his smile faltering. I stepped closer, letting my presence assert itself without a single raised tone. "I've noticed a few things," I continued, letting the words hang in the air, measured and deliberate. "Things that don't quite align with the life we've shared, the trust I've placed in this family." His eyes widened, a mixture of guilt and apprehension flashing across his face. I didn't allow him to speak immediately. Instead, I catalogued his reactions, the slight fidgeting, the hesitant step back, the flush rising on his cheeks. I was no longer the passive observer, I was a strategist, reading the room, reading them, and preparing to act with precision. Turning briefly to my best friend, I let my gaze linger, sharp and assessing. I spoke in measured tones, not accusatory, but impossible to misinterpret. "It seems there are a few truths that need acknowledgement." She shifted slightly, her posture tight, her hands clasped nervously. The room's dynamics shifted subtly, family members exchanged uneasy glances, some avoiding eye contact, others attempting to maintain polite decorum despite the growing tension. I noted each nuance, each micro-expression, understanding the web of alliances and silences that had allowed this deceit to flourish. I didn't need to shout, my presence, my calculated phrasing, and the piercing clarity in my eyes conveyed a power beyond words. The psychological space I commanded was undeniable. "My patience has its limits," I said, my voice controlled but firm. "And I've waited long enough to see the truth clearly." My husband swallowed hard, searching for words that would deflect, justify, or excuse, but I was already several steps ahead. I referenced specific details, gestures, and moments I had observed, the lingering touches, the exchanged glances, the subtle conspiracies behind closed doors. Each revelation was presented like evidence, not accusation, leaving no room for misinterpretation. My best friend's discomfort became more evident as I allowed brief pauses, watching her reaction to each carefully selected statement. The calculated cadence of my words amplified their impact. The silence that followed each observation carried more weight than any shouting ever could. Family members shifted uneasily, their roles revealed in micro-expressions. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, my aunt's hands nervously folded over one another, the subtle, almost imperceptible reactions of those who had remained silent now betraying their awareness. I recognized the passive complicity and understood that my assertion of truth was also a lesson in boundaries, a demonstration of the control I could reclaim from this orchestrated betrayal. The tension was thick, and yet I maintained composure, each thought deliberate, each movement calculated. The psychological dominance I established was quiet but unmistakable. As the conversation drew to a pause, I allowed a moment to absorb the shift. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't called anyone names, yet the room's energy had changed irreversibly. I could feel the simmering unease, the recalibration of alliances, and the dawning realization that I was no longer a silent witness. Every glance, every slight movement, every whispered acknowledgement in the room was a testament to the authority I had quietly asserted. The stage was set for the next step, where evidence, confrontation, and resolution would follow. The air was taut with anticipation, and I relished the clarity of purpose that came from a mind sharpened by betrayal and resolve. I knew the moment to strike was coming, and I would not be caught unprepared. The house felt smaller somehow, each familiar corner suddenly carrying an unfamiliar weight. I moved quietly through the formal dining area, letting my eyes linger on small details, half-empty glasses, an off-kilter place setting, a folded note tucked behind a framed photo. Something was hidden here, and my instincts told me I needed to uncover it before anyone else noticed. Family members chatted in subdued tones, but their eyes darted nervously when they thought I wasn't looking. I felt a mix of cautious anticipation and simmering anger, a mental calculation forming as I catalogued their micro-behaviors. This was more than betrayal, it was a web of secrets, and I intended to trace each strand carefully, with patience as my weapon. Reaching the corner where the note had been hidden, I bent down, fingers steady despite my racing heart, and retrieved a small envelope tucked behind a family photo. Inside were messages that left no room for doubt, cryptic lines and half-written confessions implicating a family member I had always trusted. Shock rippled through me, but it quickly gave way to clarity. Every event from the past few weeks, every subtle inconsistency I had brushed off, now connected like dots on a precise map. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. I tucked the evidence safely into my purse, weighing the timing and manner of revelation. This would not be impulsive, this would be deliberate. I needed the maximum impact, the full measure of truth laid bare. I began to test the waters, slipping subtle comments into the conversation, gauging reactions. A raised eyebrow here, a stammered reply there, each response catalogued and analyzed. The tension grew quietly, yet with intensity, as I identified who might support me, who might falter under pressure, and who would attempt to deflect blame. I maintained composure, a calm exterior masking the strategic calculations behind every glance and gesture. I could feel the simmering sense of control building within me, the psychological advantage sharpening as I understood the room's hidden hierarchies. Every small move, an exchanged glance, a carefully chosen phrase, was a step toward revealing the full picture on my terms. Family dynamics began to reveal themselves more openly. Siblings whispered under their breath, glancing nervously in my direction, minor jealousies and unspoken alliances surfaced in the most fleeting of gestures. My mother stiffened when a particular phrase was mentioned, and my aunt's eyes flickered toward me, as if weighing whether to intervene. I observed quietly, letting my presence assert itself. The social balance was shifting, and I could feel authority returning to me, not through confrontation yet, but through a quiet, undeniable command of awareness. Each micro-conflict and subtle reaction became part of the tapestry I was weaving, evidence of duplicity laid bare in human behavior. I moved to the patio briefly, the cool evening air a contrast to the charged atmosphere inside. My mind raced, replaying the newly discovered evidence, formulating the precise moment for exposure. Every detail mattered, the timing of words, the placement of objects, the alignment of witnesses. The room inside hummed faintly with laughter and conversation, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their perception. I tightened my grip on the note, the tangible symbol of control and knowledge, and allowed myself a slow, deliberate breath. The next move would require absolute precision, patience, and unwavering clarity. I had the truth in my hands, but I knew revealing it required perfect timing. The game had shifted, and I was ready to play with the skill and poise demanded by years of observation, experience, and silent endurance. The evening was far from over, and the stage for escalation was fully set. The dining room felt charged, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. I positioned myself deliberately near the table, noting the subtle tension in the family's posture, the sideways glances, the half-smiles, the quiet attempts to mask discomfort. Each movement was a clue, each whispered exchange a thread in the web I was untangling. I felt a tight coil of anticipation and nervous energy, aware that this evening would mark a turning point. My mind traced possible sequences, the exact phrasing I would use, and the moments I would pause to let the words sink in. There was no room for impulsivity, this confrontation demanded precision. Echoes of earlier chapters, the note, the hidden messages, the exchanged glances, anchored me, a reminder that every step was part of a larger strategy. I took a slow breath, centering myself for the action ahead. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but edged with authority. "I need to address something I've noticed," I began, letting my gaze settle on a particular family member whose subtle actions had not escaped my attention. The room stiffened, eyes widened, a few murmurs barely audible as shock rippled through them. I laid out my observations carefully, citing small inconsistencies, moments of duplicity, gestures that had seemed innocuous but now revealed a hidden pattern. The family member's reaction flickered between denial and guilt, their composure fraying under the weight of clear-eyed exposure. I maintained my calm, each sentence measured, each pause deliberate, signaling that I was in control. The tension was palpable, every silent observer in the room felt the shift, the invisible line drawn by a woman who had finally decided to confront the truth without hesitation or theatrics. I continued with subtle maneuvering, suggesting awareness of other underlying schemes without fully revealing the evidence I held. Hints, careful remarks, and pointed observations created cracks in the confidence of those around me. My husband shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes, while others glanced nervously at each other, sensing the calculated nature of my approach. The room felt like a chessboard, each piece moving in response to the strategic pressure I applied. I watched reactions closely, noting alliances and vulnerabilities, and mentally cataloged each behavioral clue to inform my next move. It was empowerment tempered with precision. I felt the quiet satisfaction of influence growing without the need for loud declarations or emotional outbursts. As the conversation ebbed and flowed, I observed micro-reactions, the subtle stiffening of a shoulder, a slight narrowing of eyes, a quick glance exchanged across the table. These small gestures spoke volumes, revealing loyalties, fears, and weaknesses. I made mental notes, mapping the terrain for future confrontations. Each observation was a piece of evidence, each hesitation or stutter a tool to leverage when the time came for decisive action. I was no longer merely reacting, I was directing, shaping the emotional landscape, and ensuring that every eventual disclosure would hit with maximum clarity and impact. The family's social dynamics, fraught with unspoken tension and minor rivalries, were now transparent to me, and I felt a growing sense of authority settle over the room. Stepping back slightly, I allowed a moment of silence to hang, letting the weight of my words and presence resonate. My hand brushed against a familiar object from earlier in the evening, a visual echo that anchored me to the continuity of my plan. The evening stretched before us, the subtle strategies deployed, and the knowledge that my next steps would be critical. The first confrontation had been made, the line had been drawn. I felt the tension of anticipation, the quiet thrill of control power, and the lingering satisfaction of having begun to unravel the truth on my terms. I knew this was only the beginning. I had taken my first step, but the real reckoning was just around the corner. The kitchen smelled faintly of vanilla and coffee, a domestic calm that belied the storm simmering beneath the surface. I leaned against the counter, observing the subtle ways tension rippled through the room. My previous confrontation had left impressions, uneasy glances, stiff postures, whispered exchanges, but I could see the cracks forming more clearly now. I noted each gesture, each pause, and the slight tightening around eyes and mouths. I catalogued alliances, weaknesses, and insecurities like a strategist mapping a battlefield. Despite the controlled anger rising in me, I remained measured, aware that haste could unravel the advantage I had painstakingly built. I allowed myself a quiet internal nod. This was the moment to stand firm and escalate with intelligence, not emotion. I stepped forward, my voice calm but deliberate, directing attention without accusation. "I've noticed patterns that can't be ignored," I said, eyes sweeping over the family members, catching reactions like sparks in the dim light. The subtle defensiveness in their stances, the fleeting shifts in expression, confirmed my observations. I implemented small countermeasures, hinting at knowledge of hidden intentions while maintaining composure. The effect was immediate, tension thickened, pulses quickened, and a quiet unease settled over the group. I watched, noting reactions, some shocked, some cautious, others carefully neutral. I was not merely confronting, I was asserting boundaries and reclaiming control with precision. Each glance, each measured pause, became a tool to influence without overt conflict. As exchanges continued, the room became a delicate choreography of observation and subtle influence. Conversations flowed, occasionally punctuated by pointed questions or deliberate silences that drew attention to the undercurrents of duplicity. I leveraged the small victories, nervous gestures, faltering sentences, the tentative positioning of chairs, as proof of impact. Each family member's insecurities became a foothold, each hesitant answer a confirmation that my presence and awareness were shifting the balance. The psychological maneuvering was not overt, it was a silent pressure, a shaping of perceptions, a reminder that the control I wielded came from clarity and composure, not loud outbursts. Between confrontations, I allowed moments of reflection to anchor me, revisiting the subtle cues from previous chapters, the notes, the exchanged glances, the items that had once seemed insignificant but now held weight. These emotional anchors reminded me of the continuity and stakes involved. I mapped future strategies, mentally rehearsed responses, and anticipated objections. My confidence was not brash but earned, each measured action reinforced authority and ensured that every step taken would maximize the impact when the next escalation occurred. The room's energy was taut, each person aware, perhaps unconsciously, that I was both observer and orchestrator. As the evening progressed, minor interactions, passing a drink, adjusting a plate, shifting position, became micro-battles in a larger game. I noted which family members leaned subtly toward alignment, who resisted subtly, and who remained neutral yet watchful. These observations would guide my next moves, revealing the internal dynamics that had remained hidden until now. My resolve strengthened with each passing moment. I had successfully stood my ground, turning controlled anger into strategic assertion. Yet beneath the calm surface, I felt the anticipation of future confrontations, the knowledge that each calculated step brought me closer to the ultimate reckoning. I thought I had drawn a clear line, but they had other plans that would test every ounce of my resolve. The terrace was quiet, the city lights flickering through the open sliding doors as a soft breeze carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine. I leaned against the railing, arms crossed, replaying every detail from the evening's interactions. Each word I had spoken, every pause, every carefully measured glance had rippled through the family. The look in my sister's eyes, the subtle tightening of my husband's jaw, the almost imperceptible shift of the aunt's hand, they were all data points, pieces of a puzzle that had once seemed chaotic but now revealed patterns. I catalogued who was pliable, who would resist, and who might be swayed by strategic nudges. The calmness I felt was deliberate, a mask of collected composure while under the surface, anticipation coiled like a spring ready to release. I reviewed what I had learned, whispers caught in passing, contradictions in family stories, the unspoken alliances forming like undercurrents beneath polite conversations. One revelation hit me like a spark: I had leverage I hadn't fully recognized before. A vulnerability, hidden in plain sight, a minor misstatement or an overlooked piece of information, could shift the balance of power subtly but decisively. My pulse quickened, not with panic, but with the exhilaration of clarity. Timing was everything. I had to plan carefully, orchestrate the right sequence of subtle actions, and apply pressure where it would yield maximum impact without causing premature collapse. This leverage would be the hinge on which the evening's outcome turned. I walked back inside, re-entering the living room, where the soft clatter of dishes and murmurs of conversation painted an ordinary domestic scene. Yet beneath the surface, tensions vibrated like taut strings. I spoke softly, inserting small observations into casual remarks, testing reactions. Eyes darted, shoulders stiffened, and I noted each response, a silent confirmation that the inconsistencies I had noticed were more than random missteps. They were deliberate, carefully constructed narratives that could no longer withstand scrutiny. I didn't rush, didn't raise my voice. Every statement, every gesture was calculated to reveal contradictions without making direct accusations. It was a game of psychological chess, and I had just identified a piece that could be moved to expose the entire board. As the night deepened, I found quiet moments to reassess, standing near the window with a warm mug in my hands. I reflected on previous chapters of confrontation, the incremental victories, and the subtle shifts in power. My mind mapped potential reactions, noting which family members might attempt deflection, which could crumble under gentle exposure, and who might try to challenge my authority. I was aware of the stakes. Every misstep could undo progress, but I also felt a growing sense of empowerment. The calm I projected was a strategic tool, a psychological shield, and a signal to those around me that I was firmly in control. I allowed myself a brief smile of measured pride, recognizing that tonight I had shifted the trajectory subtly yet irrevocably. Inconsistencies had been exposed, alliances tested, and my presence now carried weight that couldn't be ignored. I thought about the upcoming escalation, the next confrontations where evidence and clarity would collide with deception. Each preparation, each moment of observation, had brought me closer to the pivotal point. I felt the simmering intensity in my chest, the anticipation coiling tighter, and I knew that when the moment arrived, the storm would be mine to direct. Finally, I stepped away from the terrace, glancing back at the living room where family members were still caught in their own narratives. I drew a slow breath, feeling the equilibrium of calculated calm and poised strategy. I had drawn the map in my mind, identified the lever that could shift everything, and tested the threads of inconsistency. The pieces were in place, the timing almost perfect. The next move would not just challenge them, it would expose, realign, and force confrontation with undeniable clarity. I tightened my grip on the mug, letting the cool porcelain anchor my thoughts, and whispered to myself, I had drawn the map, but the next move would either break them or me. The dining room lights cast a soft glow over the long table, highlighting the nervous tension that had woven itself into every corner of the room. I took a measured breath, letting the calm wash over me before stepping fully into the charged atmosphere. Everyone had settled into their chairs, some offering polite smiles, others more guarded, aware that the undercurrents of tonight's gathering were anything but ordinary. I scanned the room, noting the subtle cues, the twitch of a sibling's hand, the slight falter in a relative's posture, the way my husband's eyes avoided mine. Each small gesture reinforced my understanding of who could be influenced, who would resist, and where the critical pressure points lay. I had prepared meticulously, replayed every interaction from the last few days in my mind, and now, it was time to act decisively. I began by addressing the subtle inconsistencies I had noticed earlier, weaving observations into casual conversation. As I spoke, I watched reactions, saw eyebrows rise, lips pressed together, and the shift of eyes from side to side. Then, strategically, I revealed the evidence I had gathered, text messages, emails, hidden notes, each carefully selected to expose the duplicity that had silently undermined trust in the family. The impact was immediate, the tension thickened, voices quieted, and the room felt suddenly smaller, as if everyone were holding their breath. My words were measured, deliberate, each statement punctuated with the undeniable clarity of fact. The room's atmosphere shifted, shock, discomfort, and disbelief rippled outward, and I felt a surge of controlled satisfaction, knowing the carefully planned reveal had landed exactly as intended. But the victory was met with resistance. My husband, his composure faltering, attempted to redirect the narrative, his voice rising in a mixture of protest and denial. "That's not how it happened," he insisted, attempting to paint the evidence as misinterpreted or misleading. I held my gaze steady, refusing to let his deflection disrupt the momentum I had built. The room sensed the power struggle, whispers and side glances multiplied, and I adapted instantly, emphasizing connections and patterns that left no room for ambiguity. I saw his plan falter as the truth became undeniable, and yet, the challenge was not fully neutralized. Opposition remained, subtle but persistent, threatening to derail the clarity I sought to establish. I took the final step, leveraging every observation, every piece of evidence, and the psychological understanding I had cultivated over weeks. Calmly, I dismantled the counterarguments, pointed out the inconsistencies with precision, and reinforced the moral and practical authority I now held over the family dynamics. The room grew silent, save for the occasional intake of breath, as I asserted my position with unflinching clarity. In that moment, triumph and strategic satisfaction blended seamlessly. The duplicity was laid bare, yet I remained measured, knowing the broader confrontation, the ultimate reckoning, was still to unfold. The atmosphere was charged with both relief and lingering tension, a delicate balance that demanded careful navigation in the chapters to come. As the night drew on, I stepped back slightly, allowing the echoes of revelation to settle across the room. Small gestures, a glance at a previously unnoticed object, a quiet sigh from an ant, reinforced the continuity of the unfolding drama. I felt the weight of control firmly in my hands, but the understanding that the battle for full truth and loyalty was not yet over kept my thoughts sharp and deliberate. Each movement, each word, each pause was calculated to maintain authority while preparing for any unexpected shifts in the dynamics. I felt the simmering energy of anticipation, the electric tension that comes from standing firmly on solid ground after exposing the hidden truths that had long undermined trust and stability. Finally, I allowed a moment to reflect on the evening, on the reactions and revelations, the balance I had achieved, and the path that still lay ahead. The pieces had indeed fallen into place, the room resonated with the undeniable clarity of truth, yet the subtle, unseen challenges remained, a family reeling from exposure but still capable of maneuvers to test resolve. I knew the stakes, I understood the power I wielded, and I sensed the lingering uncertainty in others that I could shape in the next moves. With a steadying breath, I recognized that the ultimate test of loyalty and truth was still on the horizon, waiting to measure who would remain steadfast and who would falter under scrutiny. The pieces had fallen into place, but the real test of loyalty and truth was yet to come. The morning light spilled through the windows, softening the edges of the home that had been a battlefield only hours before. I moved slowly, taking in the quiet after the storm of revelations. Family members gathered around, some still hesitant, others offering tentative smiles that betrayed cautious relief. I watched carefully as my siblings exchanged glances, noting which were capable of sincere reconciliation and which carried the weight of lingering resentment. The air was lighter, though still tinged with the subtle tension of unresolved emotions. Allies approached me with gentle nods, expressing quiet gratitude and support, reinforcing the sense that the choices I had made were not just strategic, but just. I allowed myself a measured smile, acknowledging the relief that came from seeing clarity restored while understanding that healing was not instantaneous, but a process in motion. I spent time walking through the house, reflecting on the lessons that had emerged from the chaos. Each confrontation, each exposure of deceit, had revealed deeper truths, not just about others, but about myself. I recognized the resilience I had cultivated, the patience that had guided my actions, and the clarity that had allowed me to navigate the intricate web of family politics. In the quiet moments, I considered what the resolution truly meant, that justice was not about punishment alone, but about restoring balance, asserting boundaries, and protecting the integrity of relationships. I shared small insights with those who were willing to listen, offering perspective on accountability and forgiveness without compromising the truth. It was a delicate balance, but one that left a sense of moral and emotional satisfaction, a finality that felt earned rather than imposed. As the day unfolded, I reflected on the growth that had come from this tumultuous period. I recognized patterns in my own reactions, noting how moments of controlled patience had turned potential vulnerability into strength. Each difficult decision, each carefully measured confrontation, had shaped a version of myself that was more confident, more capable, and more attuned to the dynamics of human behavior. I considered the parallels between past hardships and present empowerment, realizing that the experiences had not broken me but had forged an enduring clarity and emotional intelligence. This reflection reinforced my independence and preparedness for future challenges, a subtle but powerful affirmation that while I could not control all actions of others, I could control my own responses and maintain integrity through it all. Gradually, I reconnected with those family members who had proven to be allies, offering gestures of reconciliation and acknowledgement of mutual respect. Conversations flowed more naturally, punctuated by small moments of laughter, shared understanding, and cautious optimism. Where there had been tension, there was now space for dialogue, for acknowledging mistakes without resorting to blame, and for creating new patterns of interaction. These moments were not about erasing the past but about building a foundation for relationships that could endure. I allowed forgiveness where it felt genuine, without forcing it where it was undeserved, understanding that the journey toward trust would be ongoing, but now navigable with honesty and mutual awareness. As the afternoon sun began to warm the terrace, I stepped outside and looked over the horizon, feeling the weight of the past lighten with each breath. The storm had passed, and in its wake, there was clarity, resilience, and the possibility of new beginnings. I reflected on the lessons of patience, intelligence, and emotional fortitude that had guided me through the family's labyrinth of betrayal and deception. There was a calm sense of anticipation in the air, a recognition that while challenges would inevitably arise, I was now equipped with the insight and strength to meet them without fear or hesitation. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in a long while, I felt fully prepared to embrace it. The storm had passed, but the horizon promised new beginnings, and I was finally ready to embrace them.